Everyone have the code, was able to get in? All right, cool. Just make sure, double check. Everybody should have this to get in. And one more thing. Oh, that is already recording. All right, so in here we have for the next session is communication. Our main objectives is to be able to list the main types of communications, describe the difference between good and bad communications, both when speaking and listening, and demonstrate actual good and bad verbal and nonverbal communication in a role play scenario. So can anybody tell me what a nonverbal communication is? Does anybody have any ideas?
Yes.
Go ahead, Lazaro.
Nodding,
I'm sorry?
nodding of the head, maybe.
Okay, yeah, the way you're holding your head up, or you're looking away, or any other nonverbal from someone else.
Body language.
Body language, right? Similar to the holding of the
Facial
head.
expressions.
I'm sorry?
Facial expressions.
Facial expressions, right? Your eyes, or clicking, hissing, any of those kind of things, right? Leaning kind of to the side, weird, and looking away. All those things are nonverbal. You're not talking, but you're obviously presenting to the listener that you can either care less or that you actually are paying attention. The same thing with the aspect of smiling. You could be smiling, but you know those scary laughs or smiles where they're like, "Hi, how can I help you?" And you're like, "Okay, like stop smiling. You look like you're about to kill me," kind of smile. You want to be careful. You don't want to look fake, and you want to make sure always that you're sincere in reference to your verbal and nonverbal communication, because your face could be saying one thing, and then verbally you're saying another thing. You know, like, "I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry. They had to cut off your leg. Oh my God." Right? It doesn't make sense. So we have to make sure we reciprocate what we're saying, and make sure that obviously we know how to demonstrate the difference. And that's what we'll be covering in this section. So we have here Lazaro, if you can give me the bullet points, please.
Yes, sir. You want me to do all of it or part of it?
Yeah, go ahead. The actual thing.
Yes, sir. You are communicating both when you are speaking and when you are listening. Verbal and nonverbal communications are skills that are useful in all situations, and some things we do all the time without realizing. For an IT professional, good verbal communication means speaking clearly, asking good questions, not speaking too fast, explaining things simply and logically, and using professional language. You can also use many verbal communication techniques, like explaining things simply and logically, and using professional language when you are communicating in writing. For an IT professional, good nonverbal communication means making eye contact, paying attention, smiling, nodding to show you understand the listener.
Diego.
I know. Don't worry about it. Now, perfectly. Can anybody mention exactly what I shouldn't have been doing while he was reading that? Was anybody actually seeing what I was doing? I'm pretty sure if you were I'm sharing my screen. Not sure if anybody noticed what I was doing, but I purposely was doing something while he was reading. Can anybody tell me what things I was doing that I shouldn't have been doing if I was really doing good verbal and nonverbal communication with him?
You aren't giving him your attention.
Right? I started going over here to the side. I picked up the phone. I looked up. I went this way, that way. Those things, believe it or not, although I'm saying yes to him and I'm agreeing with him in any which way and point, it demonstrated a whole complete different picture to the rest of the team. He was busy. He didn't notice, but I'm pretty sure whoever might have been looking at me, they might have thought that I was doing something, but yeah, I was doing it on purpose. I want to make sure I demonstrate and understand what is a good verbal communication. Sometimes not saying anything can say a 1,000 words. I think that, what is it? A picture says 1,000 words, right? In this case, my body language and everything was not professional. I was completely off task and doing something else. And at the point, to one point, I think, I'm not sure if somebody's called out my name. Yeah.
Me, call your name.
So, yeah, so we need to be able to demonstrate this. So as we can see, can anybody now, what do you think it means to have communication at your job with a user itself, and understanding when you're having communication, be that it's via Skype or via person or even on the phone itself, what do you think it means to have good communication? Julie? Do we have Julie? Yeah, I think we have Julie.
Julie?
Yeah, she's there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um,
At your job overall, so what do you think it would be means to have good communication?
I mean, for you to be able to be comfortable and for you to know that somebody else is actually listening to you and paying attention to you. That's pretty much why it's good to have good communication.
Correct. Yeah, that's and to have it is obviously one way we could help. Thank you for your help. What can help is to get a small summary, keeping eye contact with the person, says 1,000 words, nodding, or at least if it's something that should be a no, hopefully now you're saying yes. It should be something like this where you're saying like, oh my God, no, that's incredible. You know, your facial expressions, all that thing has to be towards what it is. And you also have your written communication. We're going to see those too.
Okay, guys, so now we're gonna play an exercise. I'm gonna, each one of you is gonna have a number, so if you could please take a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil or mark on your phone, whatever is easy for you. So Jordan, you're gonna be number 1, Justin number 2, Julie number 3, Lazarus 4, LG 5, no, I'm so, better. 3, sorry, Lazarus, let me go back here, so sorry. Jordan 1, Justin 2, Julie 3, Lazarus 1, LG 2, Pablo 3, Christina 1, Carlos 2, Ahmed 3, Daniel 1, DeAndre 2, and Alexa 3. So who is number 1?
Me.
Say the names. Daniel, who else?
Me.
Jordan, who else?
I'm number 1.
Okay, so you guys, all the number 1s, you guys are gonna be the speakers, okay? So the speaker has a role. The speaker should think of something that you like to talk about. It can be anything, guys. It can be your favorite food, restaurant, football, sports. So think about something, okay? Now, the listeners are number 2. Guys, I'm gonna tell you what to do. Diego is gonna break you guys to another room.
Well, I
And
also, sorry to interject. Guys, in the Google for the communication, there is an attached file. It has your roles and each of you, the description she's saying. And for the person that is number 2, the one that's going to be, uh, you will see there your job. You need to pick some of those traits that you see there, and you're going to have to act out while the person is talking, okay? You'll see your jobs. Go ahead, continue. Sorry about that. But the file
no, that's okay. Thank
that in
you,
the
Diego.
class, if you could
When
look
you
into your classwork.
when you break number 2s, make sure you add them with me so I can assign them to the role.
All right. So give me 1 second so I can start fixing that. Right. Give me one second.
Okay, so number 2s are gonna come with from speaking. Do you see the difference how a good listener and a bad listener can be? You guys see that?
Yes.
Listening is also a very important communication skills. A lot of times when we're talking about communication, people think communication is only speaking, but it's not. Communication, it's, you know, it's about listening as well. And like you guys mentioned in the beginning, body language, how your posture is, right? Eye contact is very important as well. Of course, we need to be aware that some cultures, some people, they don't give as much eye contact than others, but all this is part of communication. Unfortunately, I have to leave again. I usually have to leave in the middle of the class, but Diego is going to continue with the class. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of the day. And please don't forget to send your resumes and any other forms that I request you to send to me. Okay? Thank you so much, guys. Continue, keep up the good work, okay?
Thank you, Lisa.
Have a
Have a
good
good
day.
day.
Bye, Diego. Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Later. As we saw, sorry, there's good and bad. Can anybody tell me some good verbal communication? What would be some keys of good verbal communication?
Yeah.
Allowing.
So
All right. I'm gonna go.
talking smoothly and sharing an incident one by one.
Okay. Who can tell me a bad non-verbal? I'm sorry, bad verbal communication. Sorry about that.
Said verbal?
Bad verbal, yeah.
One would be is like interrupting people while they're talking and not letting them finish.
Okay. What's can anybody put another one out there of bad verbal?
Sorry, Julie had to leave for a second. She said, "Be right back" on the chat.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pablo.
No
So
problem.
good verbal communication, basically, we want to be explaining things using simple, non-technical language. That's one of the things that I said. If you're speaking to a user, we want to make sure it's clear to them. Asking people they understand what you're saying is another way of confirming, and it's part of that. Using language that is correct for the situation and not using slang. Bad verbal communication will be something like slang, complicated words, using jargon that obviously the user and or the person that you're talking to is not understanding. So verbal communication, as we know, basically you're speaking, as I stated, make sure we are enunciating correctly and using the correct terminology. Some of us know some other languages, and in the worst thing about some of these languages, depending on which country you are, certain words, especially if you're using slang, can mean different things. Even in the United States itself, the slang that's used in New York versus the slang that's used here in Hialeah is completely different. And it's still English. Same thing with in Latin America or part of the world. Nonverbal communications, that one is obviously universal, as I showed in the beginning when the person was reading. I forgot who I was at that time. I started looking here, bringing up my phone, doing everything. Even when he finished, I kind of like acted like if I didn't even notice that he had completed what he was trying to tell me. Even though I was nodding and acting like if I was listening, I obviously wasn't listening, especially since he was already 5 seconds and somebody had to tell me, hey, by the way, he finished talking. So paying attention, making eye contact, smiling with a sincere smile. Don't make sure you practice on in a mirror that you don't wind up looking like some crazy person that's about to go and kill someone when you're like, hey, your smile must be sincere. Doesn't have to look like if you're gonna freak them out or anything like that. Make sure you show that you're understanding and whatever type of body language that you give them, it is correct. So let's see who else do we have here. Carlos, can you read this one for us, please?
Communication is not just about talking. Communication is listening too. You can use good verbal and nonverbal communication skills when you are listening and when you are speaking.
Correct. So if we look at that in overall, if you are not listening, would you be doing good communication? Even though you supposedly are smiling, nodding, but if you really, with your brain, are not listening to the conversation, is that still good communication?
No.
Nope.
No. It starts sounding like Charlie Brown. Anybody ever hear what Charlie Brown's mom sounds like? No?
Yeah.
Wah, 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 wah. So you see the lips moving, everything's going, but to you in your brain, nothing's coming through. So we want to make sure that when we're communicating with anybody, be that it is our turn to speak at that moment or not, we stayed focused to the actual conversation and we listen to what it is, the concerns. Once again, when we're listening, we're not trying to already come up with an answer. We are listening to ensure, and then we're most likely going to try to summarize back and ensure that we understood correctly what we were talking about. So instead of turning and talking going out somewhere else, let's look at, and if, let's see, Julie, if you can give me an example of good verbal communications from what we just were looking at. If you can give me some other examples, if you have something of good verbal communication.
Good verbal communication. I'll say okay, nonverbal for listening. We'll be listening, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Verbal, it will be listening. That's a good thing. Okay. Thank you for giving me one of the goods. Levi, can you give me maybe a good verbal communication? What would be one good verbal communication? Levi? Okay. Daniel, can you give me
Yes.
a, a good verbal communication, an example?
Example of a good verbal communication. See what example.
Contact.
That would be a good non-verbal communication, because that would be We're talking about a verbal. So
Focusing on specific words, like in a story, you emphasize on certain words.
okay. We make sure that we're explaining things usually in simple, non-technical language, especially if we're speaking to people that's not in an IT profession, right? Asking people if they understand is another way that we can be showing good verbal communication. Versus, it's could be even you summarizing, as I stated, that you to make sure that you understood what they said because you were listening, and using language that is correct with the situation. Make sure it's always professional. Your language is not using slang or profanity. No matter how comfortable we get in our jobs with and with our surroundings, we should always try to keep our
So
language
always stay professional.
correct. Hmm. So
What
I'm sorry.
would empathy also be a good verbal communication?
Right? If you're being empathetic back to them, that would be one way of showing because your the language and the way you're expressing your language to them would be a correct response to the situation. So in bad verbal communication, now that one is like talking for a long time, not making sure somebody understands. So in other words, if I like I did earlier in the beginning of this exercise, I was just there paused after he finished talking, and I basically I just did that, right? So doesn't it, that's not good. Usually also the ands, those are bad verbal communications. Using slang, as we said at work, or profanity, those are bad. Complicated words, if it's too complicated for the user, there's no need to go and break down these things to them. Just tell them that you're working on the machine. Don't start saying there's something bad on this
So sweet and simple.
their hard drive. We're reformatting and partitioning, and then the guy's like, "What in the?" So just tell them we're working on it. In what time frame, more or less, you expect the computer to be back. You don't have to get too technical unless if you have to tell them obviously that you're getting them a new hard drive or something like that, but you're not going to say everything in every single step that you're taking to do it. Questions or doubts on the difference between good verbal communication and bad verbal communication? So, non-verbal communications. Lazaro.
Nonverbal communication is especially important because it is easy to forget about. 90% of our communication is usually nonverbal. In a professional environment, you demonstrate a lot about how you feel about your colleagues and your customers through your nonverbal communication. We will now practice these types of communications more through a role play activity.
Okay. We kind of did that earlier. I'm not going to beat a horse, what a dead horse over the head here. We did kind of both of them together, right? We were letting them and stuff like that. And we're running again a little bit short here, so I'm not going to go and break everybody out. But using what you have learned so far today about communication, we work in obviously they say in three groups, but we just go over it real quick. So bad verbal communication. Carlos.
Talking for a long time without checking to make sure the listener understands you, using inappropriate language for the situation, using complicated words too that will be unfamiliar for your listener. And bad nonverbal communication, looking bored, yawning, not making eye contact, looking around the room, looking at your phone, fidgeting with your hands, swaying from one side to the other, and learning on one hip.
I think that's leaning. I don't know why it says learning. Should be
Yeah, it says
no,
learning.
it says learning. It says learning. You are right, but I think that meant leaning. Leaning.
Oh, okay.
Like if you're like this, like we want to, you know, giving that little attitude, kind of, that doesn't help here. Thank you, DeAndre.
Good communication. Good verbal communication, explaining things using simple, wait, hold on. Non-directing. Yeah, my bad. Non-technical language, especially as an IT professional. Asking people if they understand what you are saying using language that is correct for the situation. Using professional language, not slang when you are at work. Good verbal, good non-verbal communication. Huh? Anyways, smiling, nodding, making eye contact, staying up straight and confidently.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I already sent as an observer to my team. Did you guys get the answers to the form? I think was Alexa and Teresa should have received my email. Make sure all observers, if you could please, make sure you send them your form of what you observed from the 2 questions that was in there. All right. Jordan, can go over the slide for us here, please.
One second, I gotta
all right, put on the headset.
Gotta reopen it. No, I gotta reopen Nearpod because I was having some.
Can you see my
desync
screen?
with
You can't see my screen?
Oh yeah, I can. Okay.
Just read the first.
Good communicate. Okay. Good communication is essential when you are working with people. It is important to speak clearly and logically and to model good verbal and nonverbal communication skills, especially when you are having a conversation with a client. This will help you build trust and develop relationships.
Thank you. Algie. You're, let me see. There you go. Now you're, there you go. Go ahead.
Okay. Remember, you are also communicating when you write to others as well. As IT professionals, you will do quite a bit of writing when you document issues you are working on in tickets. You can use many of the verbal communication strategies using professional language and explaining things simply and logically when you use your words in writing rather than speaking.
Yeah, so that's another thing, as we've stated, not only verbally and physically, your emails also have to be as clear and concise, not to confuse the users. Just as you would speak in person, you want to make sure that you do the exact same thing with these users. You can't be giving them all this information or spitting out reports from the computer and pasting it in there. They're not going to be able to make it out. So overall, from what we learned today in communication, we should be able to list 2 main types, right? So can anybody?
Non-verbal and verbal.
That's correct. Good. And we should hopefully be able to describe the differences between the good communication skills, both when speaking and listening, and demonstrate good and verbal and nonverbal communications as we did in our little role play. At the same time, when they say communication skills itself, they mean both speaking verbally and when we're talking also about your written format. Make sure that it always is professional, not using any jargon, that it also that we confirm that they understand if we're sending IMs back and forth or emails back and forth. We do never want to assume anything. I'm pretty sure all of you know what assume spells, and it's never a good thing. So we want to make sure everything's clear and that they always agree upon that. And now you also see in the troubleshooting methodology, there is parts where you not only fix it, but you make sure that they say that you fix it. Just like when you write a story, I'm pretty sure all of you know there's always at least 3 paragraphs to do something. You're going to introduce what you're going to say. You're going to say what you said you're going to say. And then the conclusion is you said what you said you're going to say. Right? You always, I'm pretty sure if you were like me, how logical I was, I thought it was the most dumbest thing my English teacher was telling me to do. But that's the way things work, and that's the way logically things should be structured in your emails. You should always try to be I'm not saying you're going to be a scholar in writing it, but the more professional and concise your emails are when you're communicating with the users, obviously they're going to be reviewing you, and so are your peers. When you on your yearly reviews, your boss is not the only one that reviews you. Always remember that. Your peers, in other words, your co-workers, your technicians, the specialists you work with, other supervisors in there. So you might work with telecom supervisor, you got the help desk supervisor, and you have finance maybe supervisor reviewing you. And you obviously have all those tickets or cases that go out there where they're also, the users themselves are reviewing your performance. So we always want to always be communicating well to everyone, not only users, but including whoever else we're communicating inside our job. That pretty much concludes this session.